So it is February the 11th today, 2019, and I watched this recently and I've convinced James to paint with me. So I gathered a bunch of things to do the watercolors with, and some of them I did have to buy, like the tape. I bought that from the dollar store. But most of the art supplies I already had around, so I didn't really have to spend very much. Because I used to do a lot of art, and I would like to do more art again, and I'm finally getting back into it, thank goodness. Anyway, this is a wonderful woman, a wonderful instructor, and it's a 2-disc DVD that she put out, painting with watercolors. And excellent. So I've been drawing out things, listening to her advice of using tracing paper, which I didn't used to do at all. I would use watercolor pencil crayons to draw my image on the watercolor paper, and I didn't use this kind of just watercolor paper in a pad or whatever. I use the blocks, and I noticed in her video when she's actually painting later on, she doesn't paint with the stretched paper with the tape that she made. She shows how to stretch paper with the tape. So this is why I did it this way, is because I want to do it the way that she says. But she actually shows her doing the paintings, the projects, using watercolor block, which is what I prefer. And I am having trouble getting this paper to, I followed her instructions, and I did end up getting the thick tape and everything, but I had a hard time getting the paper to lay flat and not, I'll just show you. This is some that I did this morning, and see, it's already like I'm having to continue to go over it and smooth it down because the paper is pulling the tape up, and that's very frustrating. So I'll put more tape down, I suppose, because I'm having a hard time getting this paper to lay down flat as it should. Anyway, so but I do like this idea of using the tracing paper for transferring the image. So because sometimes I'll draw out some people, and I mean, okay, I could work on this, but she doesn't look very good, right? Or these guys, they don't look that great. So I don't really want them in my paintings, but these legs, they worked out fairly well. I could shape them a little bit better. And so then I thought, okay, well, I could have some standing and then do a bunch of different tops where my star of my paintings is going to be doing some fun things with her arms, and so I'll just work on it that way. And so anyway, I did transfer as Kateri Ewing suggested, using the tracing paper. And I had always wondered, well, what are people talking about when they're saying using tracing paper to? Because I've heard of people using tracing paper to transfer. And I guess maybe they just thought, oh, well, everyone knows how to do this. Well, I didn't. So all you do is you rub it after. Well, she shows how in this. You just rub it. Like I say, if I draw on this side, and then I flip it over, and put that on my paper, and then I just rub it. She uses the side of her pencil to rub that onto your painting paper or whatever. But I decided to use a Q-tip because then I can use these legs over and over and over and still see my image. And if I want to, whatever. So anyway, it makes sense for me to do it this way. So I can still see what I'm going to do. Because if I put this, if I had this all rubbed over, like just say this upside down. If I had this all rubbed over and I couldn't see this image of the legs anymore, then I go to transfer it onto my paper and I wouldn't know where to put it. But now I can see through this, so I could see, oh, I want her to be standing in between some flowers or whatever, and I could put her there. Anyway, so Q-tip I thought would work out nicely. So I tried the Q-tip, and I did have some problems, and I will show you. Let's see if I can get this up to... you're going to have to see it once it... Well, you can see a little bit of indentation there. Well, there's quite a bit of it. Anyway, so what happened is I scratched my paper with the Q-tip. And how I did that is I wasn't paying attention to when my Q-tip cotton was off, and then I ended up scratching it with the wooden bit of the Q-tip anyway. And so I have these lines, oh, terrible. And when I put the watercolor on there, the color is going to pool in those lines. So this is pretty much wrecked, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I'm just practicing. One thing that I found that was interesting is I just tried this just to play around with it. I put the watercolor pencil on the tracing paper, and it transfers. So I don't have to use pencil, which I hate, because it shows up. Even if I erase this really well before I paint, I will still be able to see that through the watercolor paint, and I hate it. So that's why I like using watercolor pencil. I've tried to tell people, oh, try it, and they're like, oh no. They think it's like childish or something to use watercolor pencil, but honestly, most of the time, like here, I just was playing around with it. But so you do have to be careful when using watercolor pencil that you don't put it where you see white. So if you're drawing an image and you have this like white halo or whatever from the sun reflecting on, say, his antlers. If I were to draw this with, just outline it with watercolor pencil, my color wouldn't show up in the right area. So you have to make sure your color is where you put the pencil, if that makes sense. You don't outline with it, or you end up just having a mess of things like I'm gonna have with all this pencil on my drawing. Anyway, so that's that. But we'll see how I'm gonna do this through, and then I'll show you how all of those lines show up, and it's gonna make me very sad. But anyway, now I watched this, A Dangerous Idea, and I did learn a few things. I found this DVD to be really boring, and I don't imagine anyone would enjoy watching it, but I learned that we share almost all of our genetic sequences with mice. 42% of First Nation women sterilized in the United States between 1971 and 1975. 400,000 poor people sterilized under the threat of losing financial assistance or sometimes without their knowledge. Like crazy. I hadn't realized that. So I learned a few things. So even though I don't imagine anybody'd like this DVD, it might benefit to watch it. Now, diet fiction, this is basically their whole foods plant-based. So that's what they're promoting in this, and that's what I promote. I mean, I don't always follow it because those processed foods and whatever, they're yummy, and it's hard to stick with healthy foods all the time, especially if you get depressed or stressed out or whatever. So, but I do think that's the healthiest way to go, and mostly vegan, because plant-based, right? Whole foods plant-based. Anyway, searching. This was terrible. Most of it, as you can see in the background, it's all like internet reading and stuff. This is really, you're reading a lot of computer screen in this, and wow, is it ever boring. And I just don't believe that any police individual would have enough power to cover up a crime that her son did or his whatever. Anyway, so I didn't enjoy it. Counterpart, first season, it's 3 DVDs, and I love him as an actor. He's great. And I enjoyed watching this. I didn't believe the idea of this story too much, but it's an interesting take on a spy thing where you have two different Earths. The Earth doubled itself, and so all the genetic information from the Earth doubled itself at a particular time, and you have spies from both Earths. So it's kind of interesting. Kootenai Trips and Trails. Now, I read this quite a while ago, and I didn't enjoy it. I kept it for James because I thought, he'll probably enjoy it because there's a lot of historical sort of stuff, but what I couldn't stand is stuff like this. Now, this is page 64, and I mean, the guy, for some reason, he decided some gourds at a fruit stand was worthy of a color photo in this book. And I mean, a lot of the, really, he's not a good photographer. He has no idea how to compose something suitable for, this is terrible. I couldn't stand this book. But there's a lot of historical sort of things in there, and James is into that. So maybe if you are, then you might be into this book. This one, wow, this was the worst book that I read on the subject. So boring and useless. I mean, I could tell you some things about what she wrote, but I don't really see any point. I mean, I think she said that she was only practicing or considered herself Wiccan for 10 years when she decided to write this, and it's like, wow, so you think you're already in a position where you can tell people about this sort of thing. Anyway, I think of philosophy as something like an old sage or something after a lot of research has finally wanted to spread philosophy. I don't know. Not her. Anyway, I might mention a few things from this later because there were some things that I found interesting, but not... No one should bother to read this, honestly. It was just boring.